Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are unpacking a brand story that reveals a true American paradox. I mean, if you look around today, you're going to see the iconic Carhartt logo practically everywhere. But how this brand got to where it is today, well, it's an absolutely amazing story of adaptation, survival, and some seriously organic cultural momentum.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture this juxtaposition. On one side, we've got the soot-covered, heavy-duty manual laborers of the late 19th century American railroads, right? And then, on the exact opposite side, we have 1990s hip-hop royalty, skateboarders, and glamorous high-fashion models strutting down global runways. So, what is the one single thing tying these two completely opposite universes together? They are wearing the exact same brand, and in many cases, literally the exact same jackets.
And well, that brings us to the core question of our explainer today. How exactly does a heavy-duty workwear brand, born out of pure necessity for the most grueling jobs on Earth, accidentally become a global fashion phenomenon? This is the central mystery we're going to solve together as we trace the historical thread connecting these two wildly different worlds.
Section 1. Honest Value, Humble Beginnings. The Birth of a Workwear Giant.
Let's set the scene. It's 1889 in Dearborn, Michigan, just outside Detroit. We're talking an era defined by steel, smoke, and locomotives. The founder, Hamilton Carhartt, actually started out in the wholesale furnishing business a few years prior, and, well, to put it simply, he failed. But that failure was the catalyst for a massive breakthrough. Instead of just guessing what the market wanted, he went straight to the source. He went out and talked directly to railroad engineers, asking them exactly what they needed to survive their brutal, dangerous shifts. The answer? Tough, durable clothing that wouldn't rip. So starting with literally just 2 sewing machines and 5 employees, he created a heavy-duty bib overall specifically for those railroaders, using ultra-tough denim and duck canvas.
Now, here's a really fun piece of trivia. Early marketing leaned heavily into a clever visual pun. The original logo was literally a drawing of a train car coupled with a heart symbol. Get it? Car plus heart equals Carhartt. It was this brilliant, memorable nod to the railroad workers who were his main customers. And hey, if you're into vintage clothing, you should know that pieces bearing this original Carhartt logo are basically considered the holy grail by collectors today.
Ultimately, what this brand stood for is captured perfectly by their very first slogan, honest value for an honest dollar. And you know, this wasn't just some marketing fluff. It was the absolute foundational ethos of the entire company. Hamilton Carhartt was laser-focused on delivering uncompromising quality and durability to the blue-collar worker. The promise was simple. If you worked hard for your money, his gear was going to work just as hard for you.
Let's move to Section 2, Cars, Wars, and Depressions, expanding through a turbulent century.
So Carhartt definitely didn't just sit still, and they saw some wild ups and downs. By 1910, just over 20 years after starting in that tiny room, they had expanded globally, opening plants in places like Liverpool, Vancouver, and even Paris. But they weren't immune to missteps. In 1911, Hamilton tried to make pleasure cars with the Carhartt Automobile Corporation. Yeah, that failed completely after just 2 years. But they always bounced back. They provided uniforms to the military during World War I. Later, when the Great Depression in the 1930s nearly wiped them out, they brilliantly pivoted away from just targeting railroaders, launching a Back to the Land campaign for farmers and ranch workers. And of course, they stepped up all over again to produce durable apparel during World War II.
But through all of that turbulence, the brand's staying power is just remarkable. Check this out. The iconic CO1 core code, which they introduced back in 1923, is still largely unchanged to this very day. Think about that for a second. Despite surviving world wars, economic collapses, and a century of massive cultural shifts, the core product, the absolute through line of the brand, stayed exactly the same, because the quality was just that good.
All right, Section 3, the Streetwear Revolution. From the Alaskan pipeline to the pavement.
This is where things get really fascinating, where we bridge the gap between historical workwear and the massive cultural explosion of the late 20th century. To understand how they got their street credibility, you've got to look at the 1970s. Thousands of workers were out there constructing the Alaska pipeline, in literally some of the most brutal, freezing conditions on planet Earth. And what were they trusting to survive? Carhartt. Proving their gear in those environments was the ultimate organic advertisement. It proved the brand's ruggedness beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it slowly began attracting consumers completely outside the traditional blue-collar trades.
Then, by the late 80s and into the 90s, something totally unscripted happened. The brand was basically hijacked by youth culture. Hip-hop icons like Tupac and Eazy-E just started wearing Carhartt jackets independently. Graffiti writers and skaters flocked to it because that thick duck canvas protected them when they wiped out on the pavement, and those massive, oversized pockets, perfect for holding spray paint cans. The idea spread like wildfire. It became a symbol of pure street credibility, prized for its utilitarian look. This underground adoption was so incredibly powerful that suddenly this gritty Michigan workwear brand is showing up in high fashion magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. No way, right?
Now, what's really interesting here is how the company responded to this. They didn't reject this new audience at all. In 1989, Swiss designers Edwin and Salome Faye started introducing authentic American Carhartt gear to the European market. By 1991, you literally have Carhartt outdoor jackets being displayed at New York City fashion shows. Recognizing this immense cultural wave, the company took a brilliant step in 1994. They granted the Fays a license to create a dedicated streetwear line under the name Carhartt Work in Progress, or Carhartt WIP.
So the brand essentially split into two parallel universes that perfectly complement each other. Traditional Carhartt stays totally true to its roots, focusing on blue-collar trades, maximizing durability, and maintaining manufacturing in places like Kentucky and Tennessee. But then, on the other side, you have Carhartt WIP. They are focusing on skaters and fashion enthusiasts, slightly tweaking those classic silhouettes with refined streetwear details, and operating out of global fashion hubs like Paris, Tokyo, and Berlin. They managed to become a highly coveted streetwear label without ever alienating their core hardworking customer base. A real game changer.
Which brings us to Section 4, a 135-year family affair, surviving as a privately held legacy.
Let's look at the actual business reality behind this phenomenon, because it is incredibly rare today for a brand this massive to avoid being bought out by some giant conglomerate. But Carhartt, they've remained entirely independent. It all started with Hamilton. When he tragically passed away in a car accident in 1937, his son Willie stepped up and kept the doors open right through the Depression. Then Robert Velade took over, followed by his son Mark, who launched their massive global operations, all the way down to the fifth generation today, with Cam and Gretchen Velade still running the business.
135. I mean, that number is just staggering. 135 continuous years of family ownership. This unbroken chain has cemented a legacy of independence, and it's absolutely crucial, because it allows them to focus on long-term quality, rather than just stressing over next quarter's shareholder profits.
And equally impressive is this number right here, 2,300. That's the number of American workers still employed by Carhartt today. And notably, that includes over 1,000 union members. By continuing to build their core Made in the USA line and factories across Kentucky and Tennessee, they are actively, intentionally keeping those blue-collar roots alive.
Honestly, this whole wild journey is perfectly summarized by their enduring ethos, Carhartt, outworking them all since 1889. It's a mentality that completely unites the guy freezing on a construction site, the skater grinding a handrail in Berlin, and the model walking a runway in Paris. Because at the end of the day, they all recognize the exact same honest value.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. When you see that iconic C logo today, what do you see? Do you see a rugged workwear staple or a high fashion statement? Because the sheer brilliance of the Carhartt paradox is that somehow it's authentically both. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep looking for the incredible stories behind the things we wear every single day.